Hello, good morning. This is Harry Sim from Cypress Envirosystems, and what we'd like to show you today is how we use the new auto calibration routine for the wireless gauge reader to read standard air gas regulator gauges. It's important that is standard because we modified the gauge reader software so that it could adapt automatically to the standard air gas gauges. Now, if you remember, what we used to have to do was that we put the gauge reader on a gauge, and then we needed a handheld unit that a person needs to calibrate and needs to spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes with someone who's somewhat skilled to do that. And it's done out in the field at a customer site, so we need to fly someone out there, spend time to do the calibration, and that really adds the cost of the total installation, the installed cost of the gauge reader. So what we want to do now is have an auto calibration routine that we can mount on here. Does not need a skilled person, does not need the handheld, and it could be done at the factory. So before it ships, it's pre-calibrated, and then when it goes to the customer site, they can just snap the gauge reader back on, and then it would work right away with minimum amount of effort. So let me show you how we do that now. The first step for the auto calibration is that we need a blue box. That will be at Taylor's, for example, and we'll have a blue box that can calibrate a whole number of different WGRs. We would need a shim that would mount the WGR onto the regulator gauge, a spacer, and I'll show you what we use that for, and then just a regular screwdriver. Okay, so let me show you how we would mount this on. Just putting on a WGR is just like what we used to do before. You put on a shim, and it goes around the gauge. Make sure I do this properly. Okay, now this spacer here is really important because now we put the spacer on top of there, and what it does is that it makes sure the gauge is always at a set distance from the gauge reader, and it's not tilted and it's not in too far or up too far. So that's a big element to helping us to do the standard calibration. Now what I'm going to do is just put this gauge reader on top of the gauge. Okay, now you can see that it sits in there really nice and tight, it doesn't move around, and then I'm going to tighten the hose clamp. That's what we used to do in with the previous models. Alright, so now it's on there pretty good, and once this is on here, what we want to do is to put it onto auto config mode. So if you take a look at what I do here is okay, so this is in configuration mode. This is WGR 0F5A4. You'll see this here. Now, what I do now is I'll go to the blue box, okay, and if you look at the screen here, I'll say find WGRs, and I'll find the 05A4. I've actually found a few other ones that are in our office right now, and we said, okay, well, we're going to go and calibrate this one. Now, this one, I need to put in what type of gauge it is in terms of the minimum maximum pressure. That's the only thing we need to enter manually. So this is 0 to 4,000 psi gauge, and I'll say configure WGR. Now it's retrieving the image from the WGR, and now it shows it. Now what you see is that we just put the WGR on the gauge, and we didn't care how it was rotated. Well, actually it figures that out by itself. It'll figure out the middle of the gauge, and it'll figure out how it's rotated. Where's the 0 point? Where's the 4,000 psi point? So if you click this one, you'll see these blue lines is where it found it, the middle, the minimum, and the maximum. So this is what replaced what a skilled person used to do with the handheld, but now the software in the WGR in the blue box knows how to do that. So basically you can see it not calibrated with the calibration marks and say, okay, this looks good. So you say confirm, and then it says WGR configuration completed, I'm done. Okay, now I come back to the WGR, and then I would just put it back into normal mode, and it's configured. And now I can just remove the WGR, and then this unit can ship, the regulator can ship with this adapter on. Now actually what we found is that our shim needs to be adapted a little bit so it's on more tight, that's something we're going to adapt for this particular gauge. But the idea now is that this adapter is now fixed onto the regulator. This can ship, and then when we go back on site, then all we need to do is to then snap it on, and it would be pre-calibrated. All right, so we'd appreciate your comments and thoughts on that. Talk to you soon. Take care.